you're only competing against yourself. I have no ability to change the way that my competitors were going to race. All I could do was change the way that I was going to race.
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Pete Olusoga and this is 80% Mental, a podcast all about the psychology of sport and performance. A warm welcome to all of you out there listening. I hope you're enjoying this series as much as I am. I've had the opportunity to talk to some unbelievable performers, not only from the world of sport, but from other performance arenas too, about the mental skills, strategies, and approaches that underpin peak performance, and about their own paths to success. It's really been fascinating to get a glimpse into the process, the motivations, the hopes, dreams, and sometimes the struggles of these top performers. All of those episodes are available on the website, EightyPercentMental.com, so make sure you subscribe either there or wherever you listen to your podcasts so that you get all of the up-to-date info and notifications of new episodes like this one. I was coming back from Portugal recently, and a woman on the flight was having real trouble getting herself on the plane, like borderline panic attack. And that might have been because it was a Ryanair flight, but fear of flying, I think, is a pretty common phobia. But imagine instead of a 2-hour flight in the comfort of a 737, you're piloting a small single-seater airplane with a 25-foot wingspan through a 30 to 50-foot window at 250 miles an hour. Scary stuff. Although not so scary for my first guest tonight, who I have to say, honestly, is kind of a big deal. So I'm truly honored to welcome my first guest to tonight's podcast, Mike Goulian. Mike, I'm just going to read out a couple of things here to introduce you properly, if that's okay.
Sounds great, absolutely.
So Mike is an aerobatic pilot from the USA. He says he's been flying since before he could drive a car. Mike's run a flying school for over 30 years and worked his way to the top ranks of airshow display flying and competitive aerobatics. Mike became the youngest ever US national champion in the advanced category at the age of 22. In 1992, he was the top-ranked US male aerobatic pilot and silver medalist in the unlimited category. Did that again in 1993. And in 95, became the US national champion in the unlimited category. Mike's been a member of the US aerobatic team in 94, 96, and 98, I believe, and is a Red Bull Racing pilot. Like I said, pretty big deal. Mike, welcome to the podcast. Thrilled to have you on.
Peter, thank you very much. And I know it's been a little bit of a struggle to try to put this all together, but I think our discussion tonight would be really worth it. So thank you for having me on the podcast, and thanks for trying to stick with my crazy schedule.
No, yeah, you're more than welcome, and really looking forward to talking to you about some of the mental challenges about what you do. But joining Mike, and I'm honestly not just saying this, is another pretty big deal. At this time in the world of performance psychology, we've got Dr. Adam Naylor. Adam spent over 25 years serving as a mental performance consultant to a wide range of professional, Olympic, and NCAA athletes and organizations. And he currently leads performance psychology for the professional services firm Deloitte and supports athletes through Telos SPC. Adam, welcome to 80% Mental for the second time, actually, because we spoke on the Live from ASP episode last year, didn't we?
That's right. It's almost been a year. Pete, thank you. You are way too kind. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Mike and I have had so many conversations over the years, and they're always way too much fun.
Good. Well, I honestly, I'm so pleased that we've managed to arrange getting you both together on the podcast. Like you said, Mike, it was a long time coming, but we got there eventually. Okay, so I want to start, Mike, with you, and just to get a little bit about your background, really. So how you got from kind of just starting out to national champion to Red Bull Racing. Can you just tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, well, Pete, so I grew up just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and my dad owned a flying school. It was quite a big flying school, but I grew up as an athlete, right? I was a golfer, a hockey player, a baseball player, The bigger the jump I could do on my bicycle, the better it was, and just grew up as an athlete. But then by the time I was about 15, my dad wanted me to learn what it was like to earn a living and find the value of a dollar. And so he brought me to the airport one summer on school break. And I tell people, like, I didn't find airplanes found me. The environment around an airport is pretty intoxicating. It's really cool. Sometimes it's a little loud, so if you can hear some jets and airplanes in the background, I apologize for that, because I'm in my office looking at my hangar window, and all my planes are out there, but the runway's out there too, so it's a little loud.
No,
But
I like
um,
it. Just adding atmosphere to the podcast. I like it.
right. And so I started flying when I was about 15 years old. I sold on my 16th birthday, like we said, prior to even being able to drive a car legally by myself. And I was homesick from school one day, and I saw a movie on aerobatic flying. And I just thought, man, that looked like something that would be really cool to do. And I'm I always want to be measured in anything that I did in life, whether it be sports or business. And aerobatic flying to me was one of those things that, like, hey, it gives me the ability to do something where I can achieve a goal, try to be better. I can be measured against myself and others. And so that's really how I got into aerobatic flying. Was it was just a, if you will, it was a sport that I could endeavor to be great at after my school years.
Yes, you've always had that kind of competitive streak, competing with yourself, pushing yourself to be the best at what you do, and this kind of gave you an avenue to do that.
It did, definitely.
Yeah. So tell me how you got from kind of taking up this sport to kind of the incredible success that you've had, really.
You know what? I tell people I started and I was too stupid to stop. Right? I don't know. Like there's there's just no. I don't know what it's like to quit something, or to sort of not just give it your all. And so to me, I once I found that, I just looked at myself as uh, an airshow pilot and an aerobatic pilot first and foremost
Hmm.
through my career. Like, that's what I wanted to do. Um, so I started competing regionally in aerobatic competitions. And as there's 5 levels of competition back in the day. There's primary, sportsman, intermediate, advanced, and unlimited. And so as you get better, those categories, you get higher and higher in categories, but also the equipment, the airplanes that you fly, need to coincide with that. So as my skills and my budget allowed, I would go from one category to the next category to the next category. And I started to do really quite well. And um, the year before I won the nationals, I think I might have flown in like 10 contests and won 8 of them. And then in the next year, started to win the nationals. And then that sort of really parlayed into a career of air show flying as well. So doing displays as well as competing.
Hmm.
And that's a 10-year. I made it sound quick and easy, but it's a 10-year process probably to get there, 8 to 10 years. Um, and then started flying in the Red Bull Air Race when it was created in and around 2005.
I guess I described it as flying a small plane through an equally small window, really, really fast. But for the uninitiated amongst us, which kind of includes me, I have to admit, can you tell us a little bit about what's actually involved in what you do? Because obviously there's the aerobatic stuff and there's the racing stuff. Can you kind of give us a quick description of what it is that's involved?
So very simply, it's a Formula One car with wings, right? That's kind of, if the listeners are like, what the heck are these people talking about? It's a single seat, very small, incredibly strong, incredibly agile airplane. Um, the fuselage itself is built out of steel tubes, and then the wings, the tail, and the covering of the airplane are all lightweight carbon fiber. So the airplane is about 5 times stronger than any airliner that you would get into, and it's much more maneuverable and nimble than any fighter jet that you'd get into, right? Like if you think about it, it does it. It weighs around 1,200 pounds. And when we're flying the both in the Rebel Air Race or in air shows, it's a G excursion of about upwards of plus 10 to plus 12 G, which is quite a bit. And so it's I would have to say it's a pretty good workout.
Awesome. I mean, that sounds like a pretty physically demanding sport, and we'll get into some of the mental aspects of that as we get on. But Adam, I want to bring you in as well here. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, but also how you ended up working with Mike?
Yeah, that's a bit of a story. It's actually before we even got on here today. You saw perhaps part of the story as well go down. So myself, so I've been in the sport performance psychology space forever. My bad
Hmm.
joke in life now is it's the only marketable skill I know. I was a geek about it in the early '90s. Managed to get all the degrees necessary and just make this robust career out of it. Where I think about it so often. I've had the pleasure of work in sports, in aviation, in the UFC, like normal traditional sports that we all know about, and then sports where I got to learn a ton about.
Hmm.
So ironically, as we were talking, I'm sure you could start to see a little bit more. I wasn't afraid of flying before meeting Mike. Now I think I'm a certified aviation geek. When it comes down to it, with Mike and the 99 team, just spending time together, one of my sweet spots is down in Mike's hangar. It's the cleanest hangar in the world. You could eat off the floor. It's a beautiful hangar, and just see the different planes and learn things. So my career was really one of curiosity. But you asked, how did Mike and I end up together? And Mike might know the story even better than I. I want to say I think our first meeting was around 2015, if I got it about right. And I was referred to him from his golf professional. So I
Okay.
still swear to this day, Mike thought I was going to improve his golf game. Um, and the bottom line is, I walked into the hangar going, "How are we going to help this super small plane and this athletic pilot end up on as many podiums as possible?" So it was really something I did not. Again, I knew very little about it, and I think it speaks to Mike. Right, he's always a learner. He said, "I think I want to learn. I think this is important to be part of my development, part of my team." And we really took it from there. I think we really grew in the space together over the years, and I think had a lot of fun successes, and supported a great team. So it started with a Golf Pros recommendation, and I can tell you, elite aviation is nothing like golf when it comes to the mental game.
And full disclosure, Pete, my golf game has not improved since I've met Adam. So just to say,
But we found a bunch of podiums somehow. So
we did it. We did it.
priorities.
Yeah, we kicked some butt in the air. I think that's true.
So let me ask you then, Mike. When it comes to some of the mental challenges of racing and aerobatics, obviously you've worked with Adam for a number of years. What would you say are some of the main mental challenges that you have to deal with?
So it's interesting. Our sport in the Red Bull Air Race was very much a team sport, but you don't realize that in the beginning,
Hmm.
right? You think that the performance, your result on the racetrack, is really directly related to how you're doing, and that there is some truth to that. But as I started to work with Adam more, um, you begin to realize that it's all of the pieces that you have to put together to make a successful team. And there's what we would say on our team is there has to be a bunch of magic in the hangar, right? And it's funny where when you see somebody that's at the top of their game, maybe today it's Rory McIlroy, or the new rising tennis stars. They have a little bit of a swagger, right? They just walk onto the court or onto the course, and they just know that they're going to be great. But there's a whole bunch of people maybe ranked 5th through 50 that are trying to find that swagger, right? And it is such a fine balance, and it comes and goes. Well, when we started in 2015, I didn't have the swagger, right? And you lose. Like, I knew that I was a great aviator, and I knew I was as good as everybody else, but our results weren't showing it. And then after a while, you start searching, and the harder you search, the harder it is to find, right? And so Adam, he basically started to break us down. In my opinion, maybe he's going to laugh at all of this, but my take of it was he needed to create a team which supported me, which gave me the confidence to go out there and to do my best and basically find that swagger, right? And to, as we would talk about, like, hey, you just have to go be an athlete, right? And there was a time where the technical stuff went away, because the just like Formula One in the Red Bull Air Race, it was all technical. Like, we were trying to match a line that the computer was drawing for us through the track. Well, we're humans, and we can't do that. We're not capable of doing that, right? We're athletes in a sport, and the winds are changing, the conditions are changing, all of those kinds of things are happening, and we just have to react to it or try to control it. So I think, to sum up, what did Adam do for me and the team? He gave us belief in ourselves, and he figured out how to get through my brain to give me the swagger that I needed to be who I truly was on the racetrack.
No, it's awesome. Adam, tell me about the swagger.
This story is so wild for me to hear, right? Because I don't disagree with it, but I also disagree with Adam giving Mikey the swagger, because I'm not sure, that's how it works, or if that's even what happened. When I think about it, I can always go to that first day when I walked into the hangar. There was no doubt in front of me was one of the best pilots on the planet. And Mike kind of said it. He knows he is excellent at what he does. He was curious. He was almost, if you took out a psychology 101 textbook for sports psych, he was taking notes, and he was like, teach me more, tell me more. I want to learn something today. In some ways, me as a professional, I always pause at that when someone that elite says that to me, because I'm like, you know a lot. Let's slow down here for a sec. Mike and I have laughed about this. That darn notebook used to drive me nuts in meetings. I think we finally got him to shut it by like the 4th meeting. I'm like, I'm not that brilliant that you have to write down every word I have to say. And Mike, you are smart enough to remember the key ideas, and we're going to build a story over time. So I think, one, this was really a build. And I think the first step was to clean up some rigidity that can happen when we try and be excellent, right? We try and get it perfect. As Mike said, right? We had this excellent MIT aerophysicist who was planning out the route, but humans don't do an exactly direct route. So unless you sand off some of the rigid edges, you can't perform in the real world with so many factors going on. So I think there was really that piece. Another note I want to throw out there, so we think about what we're doing. This just wasn't about being an elite aviator. So Mike, right, there were about 14 folks in that first, when we came together racing a Red Bull Air Race. So I think the audience needs to think about this. So this was 14 of the best aviators from all over the planet, right? An international competition. So it's easy to lose your confidence compared to that bunch. But when you walk down the street, it's like, wait a second, you're pretty amazing. So I think we have to also keep in mind, we're not just talking about being elite at aviation. We're talking about competing against the best of the best. And Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe there were times that we won and lost races by the nose cone on the plane.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
Right.
It turned out to be thousandths of a second at times.
So think about this. Your audience to think about this. Going through the air for about 1 minute and winning and losing by that little factor. So we weren't talking about this I can do it confidence. We were talking about a boldness to say, let's go compete. I think I'll be all right today, and let's see what happens. Let's throw down the chips. So then also to what Mike said, I think there was this cleaning up team culture a little bit. I know I'm remembering the early years, Mike, you talked to me about, well, we'd have our practice days, and then when it was day to race, we stopped talking to the other hangars, and the hangar would get super serious. And I remember in my head, I was kind of like, that's cool that you're focused, but there's a difference between focused and on pins and needles.
Yeah.
So, and some of that had to do with the hanger culture. And as Mike talks about the hanger culture that evolved, Pablo, Warren, I think the hanger culture was serious on race day. There were no jerks in there. There was no extra stress, but it wasn't devoid of laughs or nice pats in the back. Is that fair, Mike? It wasn't a pins and needles hanger. It was a professional hanger down the
Yeah,
stretch.
sure.
And I think that was critical, right? Because there's this term I love that I think, Pete, you've probably seen, we've seen some science, emotional contagion.
Mhm.
Our emotions infect each other. So if we couldn't infect our pilot because he had to go, but we also didn't want him to infect us while we're trying to help him out to get the plane in the air safe and fast. So I think that hanger culture was a big thing. So I think when I hear the confidence piece, I go, yeah, it came there. To me, it felt a lot more organic to me than it probably felt to Mike. And Mike, though, I can tell you the day I think your whole team felt the confidence. It was Las Vegas 2016.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember what happened? Last
Well,
race of 2016. You won it, by the way. I don't like what Wikipedia says.
yeah, we totally would we would have won that race if it didn't get winded out, but we blew everybody away by a long shot, right? Nobody was going to catch us at all. I
I
agree.
saw the
So
flight video. You won it. I'm sorry. Everyone got
yeah,
in the air. You were the number one race. The pylons were like crooked on the ground, and you still just flew through them as if it was nothing.
yeah. So Peter, it was definitely the most challenging conditions we've ever had in the air race.
Mhm.
And literally, like people were worried about trying to land the airplane back on the runway after the flight, not as much as the flight. It was so windy, and we totally crushed it. And I agree with you. Like then, and what happened is the pilot after me hit a pylon, and then it went out of the wind limits, and so on. And so there was two people left to fly. So they actually officially didn't have a race, but in team number 99, we're like, we won. We get that. We don't have a
Yeah.
trophy to show for it. And Wikipedia doesn't say that we did, but we won the race. And, but that was, and we were awesome. The whole thing, it was like we flew on rails in just stupid conditions. And I think that was probably a turning point for me as well. And like, hey, these are conditions that like were just almost impossible, and we made it feel like there was no problem with the wind. And then
Mm.
that was sort of, it gave me belief in myself. I think it gave the team belief in me, and just us as a unit that we could go out and do it, right?
It was wild, Mike. And again, maybe it stands out big in my memory because I was noticing the whole team. Because to start now, so that was 2000 to start the 2017 season. We all met down the hangar. So it was Steve, Warren, Pablo, you, me. So we're talking tactician, coach, the
Yeah.
brain, the brains of the path, MIT aerophysicist, right? And when I went in, we had a few seconds before we were going to have our team meeting. And I don't know if it was Pablo. You're like, dude, you got to watch the Vegas flight. It was crazy. Like, that's what you said. So we kind of watched it. And as everyone watched, we were like, man, you flew great. So we're watching everyone light up. And I don't know if you remember, I try not to overdo handouts or anything. I had one handout for that team meeting. And on it said Plymouth, which is where your hangar is, to the podium.
Mm-hmm.
Let's
I
go.
still have that, by the way.
You make my day. And I'm not one to talk about outcomes or dwell or get distracted by them. But that was day. It was like, okay, we got the plane, we got the pilot, we got the team. And it was really cool, Mike, because you could feel it that day.
So the swagger, the confidence, and the confidence in the team is important. There's a couple of other things that jumped out when you were talking there. One of them was letting go of outcomes, and we're just going to go out there and compete, let the chips fall where they may. I think he said, just letting go of that outcome completely. But the other thing which really jumped out to me was the idea of kind of letting go of precision and letting go of the idea of being perfect. Because for me, as a kind of casual observer, this is a sport where you have to be pretty precise. So the idea of kind of letting go of that precision is almost counterintuitive Mike, can you tell me a little bit about how you maybe went through that process, or am I even getting that right?
Yeah, but it's okay. This sounds funny. Um, Precise by whose measure, right? So, uh, yeah, when somebody says, "Oh, I can fly an airplane at 230 miles an hour through two inflatable pylons, and I want to keep the airplane within a few feet of the track," like, yeah, okay, that's precise. But honestly, we're almost thinking inches, right? And
Mm.
so it's a huge difference. And yet you're not thinking about, this is the beauty of it, you're not thinking about being precise when you're doing it, right? You're just saying, I need to get from here to there. And Pablo said, squeeze a little bit more here, let off a little bit more there, feel this there. And it's that whole athlete in the sky and the 10,000 hour rule, all that kind of stuff. Like, it just happened, right? You didn't force it. You just tried to
Mm.
make it happen. And so the precision just comes as something that is the result of, just trying to find the right path through the track and being athletic about it and letting your innate instinct make a perfect track.
So you're kind of really dialed in the moment, almost kind of feeling it rather than aiming for that precision. Is that
Yeah,
is
you're
that?
you're 100% trying to feel it. You're
Mm.
absolutely, like, in the, when it's going well, right? When, if you have to pull too hard to get through a gate somewhere, that you're out of line. You can just feel when the airplane's on rails. You can feel, it's like when the airplane was not being strangled by me, you could feel like it was a racehorse, right? Like,
Mhm.
it just wanted to run faster and faster, and the airplane would do that. And then when I would get out of position and start to have to yank on it, well, that slows it down. And so you could feel the sort of energy in the plane as you let it do what it wanted to do, which was go fast.
Can I add a piece in here? It might even be a question for Mike because I heard what Mike said.
Sure.
I think it's going to keep adding to where you were going, Pete. So, Mike, I feel like one thing I learned to know, and you said it, as long as you weren't holding too tight. So, one goal always, is it fair to say, Mike, is to not take away the plane's energy. The goal
Right.
is to get energy into the plane and not steal the energy from the plane. And
Yes.
if Mike was trying to be too perfect, he'd steal energy from the plane. And though, sorry, Mike, this is like a sort of question statement. Why, if though it was all over the place, then he ends up chasing the race, right? So when you talk precision, it's don't steal the energy from the plane, don't be so wide out of a gate that then you're just chasing and trying to make up for that precision mistake. And that was the thread that we were always trying to get to. And when Mike says be an athlete, talks feel, Mike, so much of it was us saying use your eyes, right? Peter, it's going back to the motor development literature. When we would talk courses and when you would show up on sites, you and Pablo would talk about, I remember when we were in San Diego, you were like, that battleship, that's my sight line on this one. So it would be really getting out of his head and letting him go. But I think when we talk precision, to me, it's was energy being robbed from the plane because the human in the seat, or was the human in the seat so sloppy you were chasing the whole way and we're trying to hit that window? Mike, does that clean that up a little bit? You see where I'm
Well,
going there?
yeah, you're totally right. But I think another paradigm shift for us mentally was like, because you can say it all you want, but you have to believe it. And that is, you're only competing against yourself. Because I can't, I have no ability to change the way that my competitors were going to race. All I could do was change the way that I was going to race. So, Adam, that's one of the things that you told me, was like, hey, let's go shoot for a number, right? Let's go shoot for 103. Let's go shoot for 1025. Let's go shoot for 102. And so then I started to compete against myself, and that led to consistency, right? And then, the way that I looked at it is, the more consistent you got, the more fear you put in your competitors, because like a lot of my, let's face it, a lot of the success that I had was because in 2018, our competitors knew that if they were going to beat me, they had to be on their game, which puts them off their game, right? And so that was another thing that I had to learn was like, Michael, you just go be you because they're the ones that are nervous. You're not nervous. So we went out, put down a number, and like try to go beat that, peeps. It's like up to you. Go do that. And for most of 2018, they couldn't do that.
And even as you speak of it, you and Pablo could always predict a pretty aggressive number that you guys could hit, which I think is an interesting note too, Pete. When we think about like kind of might be like, it wasn't a conservative number. It was like
Mm.
here's a 99 plain number. Let's go do it and see what happens. Like
No, I love that. I mean, this is performance goals in action in real life having a real impact here. We talk about this theoretically, don't focus on outcomes, focus on performance. But here you are laying down these, challenging performance goals, and this is the real life impact. You're aiming for consistency, you're getting consistency, and you're putting the fear of God into your competitors. No, I love that. Adam, we talked about feel and we talked about, how do I put this? It's not automatic pilot, if you pardon the pun, but you talked about this idea of kind of almost letting go and just feeling it and not strangling the performance by trying too hard. As the psychologist, how do you help athletes to do that? How do you help them to get into that headspace? Maybe some of the things that you might do, the processes that you might work through. Any tips or ideas?
well, man, I could go all day on this one in some ways, and I think especially in this situation, and frankly, it's how I like to work. I think it's always best when it's kind of embedded and never excessively aggressive in the education, because that's really what we did, right? So if I think about the factors of the team's work on the mental game, the emotional game, whatever term we want to use, I actually made a note before this call. I'm like, there was the prep in between races. So between races, Mike and I would probably catch up once or twice. It was to debrief the previous one. It was to prep a little bit for the next one, but it was light. It wasn't like do this different in this next one. It was more Mike talking, going, "Yeah, I was a little bit out of my bubble on this one. Maybe I need it." It was almost once we laid the foundation of the take care of your own business and see what happens and some basic skills. It was really Mike refining them with the expert to go, "Really? Are you sure?" Or maybe a little bit more of that. So there was this between prep time. Mike, if I think about it correctly, if I'm to time it right, it's probably after an event. We probably tried to get together within 2 weeks, so it was a little bit fresh in the mind. And then before you headed out to an event, it was probably about 2 weeks before that. So we kind of were able to lay that. So there's the prep in between stuff that I think feels traditional in sports psych. But again, I want to say I'm never a heavy-handed with mental skills guy. I'm always about the athlete building that. And Mike did that, right? So if you were to look at the cage of his plane, those steel bars, he actually printed up, I think it was Mike, breathe and use your eyes. The two last reminders to allow him to be an athlete in there. I never said, go do this, it'll make you better. We worked it so it came to Mike and it fit him.
Yeah,
Um,
so
yeah.
inside of my cockpit, I put a label inside, which could change from race to race or flight to flight, and it was a thing that I would look at just before I would enter the track, and it might say like believe, right, or trust yourself, or breathe deep, or whatever it is, or relax, or whatever that might be, those key words. And it changed from where we were in the season to where we were race to race, all of those things. So we did that. But the other thing that was pretty interesting, and this is a golf analogy that really helped me, is at the beginning of the season, and I was like, listen, we're humans, right? So let's just go try to make a bunch of pars this year. And oh, by the way, you might make a birdie or two, and you're probably going to make a bogey or two, right? And that kind of set my expectation for the year. There's going to be whatever, 9 races, 8 races, 10 races, and like, hey, let's just go try to make a bunch of pars. And every once in a while, you're going to get maybe you're going to get lucky, whatever, and you're going to make some birdies, and then maybe you're going to get unlucky and you're going to make a bogey or two. And what that did for me is set an expectation of how I was going to perform for the year, right? Hey, and oh, by the way, we won twice in that year, and we had a couple of track records. We won qualifying a couple of times. In con, I won qualify. I was last to qualify, and I won qualifying. It's the best of two qualifying laps. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go out and do it again. And I beat my own time to stay on top of qualifying. And we did those. So those were our birdies, right? And then we had a bunch of great races and podiums. And those were just kind of pars and almost in a way, ho hum, right? We just kind of prodded through the race. We're like, oh, guess we're second. Guess we're third. That's really cool. And then we had a couple of bogeys. And what it did for me is to be like, oh, that's my bogey. Not me coming back to the United States going, oh my God, Adam, the season's over. I'm a failure. We're in trouble. Like, nope, we expected that. We talked about that in February. It didn't happen until August. But hey, there's your bogey. Don't worry about it. Sweep it under the rug. Let's go to the next one. And they talk about golfers being able to take a bad shot and put it out of their brain for the next one. And we kind of did that on a big macro level with the races.
Yeah, I'm so happy you remember that, Mike. So, Pete, what Mike's basically saying, if I were to kind of really turn it into like tight sports psych stuff, I think it's me stylistically, but I think it's very much what we did is every single season we doubled down on perspective and acceptance. Right? We said we're willing to accept what happens every week because we're against the best in the planet, and we're going to have perspective that this is a X number of race season. We're going to lay down a bunch of fast times, and we trust that we're going to end up where we're supposed to end up. And Mike, we laid it so it wasn't just a mantra; it was something that really was in our gut. And Mike said it so well there, right? It's why there was no panic if it was like, it's so funny when we talk about like 2018 when I'm like, oh, there was no panic when Mike got fourth. I'm like, holy crap, most guys would love fourth. But like to us, that was a bad race in 2014, right? 18. But you were able to roll with everything going on if you could really have a pilot and a team. Because I think, Mike, to your point, when talking about team, the team was on board with this, right? So, yeah. Pablo and I would catch up regularly and I'd just stay on message. Like, I feel like, hey, we're all right. Lay down some good races. We got this. We're all right. We got a phenomenal plane. And doubling down on perspective and acceptance allows you to be confident. Because then no outcome rattles you. As long as you know you're good, no outcome's going to rattle you if you've got perspective and acceptance in something of this intensity. So, Mike, I'm so happy you pulled that up. It makes me happy that you still remember it these many years later.
You're listening to the 80% Mental podcast. I'm here with Mike Goulian and Dr. Adam Naylor, and we're talking about the psychology of the skies. And honestly, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation so far. And I think if any of the episodes I've done, this one, we're really seeing the real life application of lots of psychological principles here. We've just been talking about using focus cues and changing up those focus cues depending on situations and time of year and whatever else is going on. We've been talking about acceptance and setting expectations. And again, I love the idea of this golf analogy. You're going to aim for par, accept some bogeys, maybe get some birdies as well, but just being realistic about that. So we're really delving into like the application of lots of different psych skills here. You've mentioned the team quite a lot and some specific team members. Mike, talk to me a little bit about that, because excellence doesn't happen on its own. Talk to me a little bit about the team and, how we talked earlier about the confidence that the team, brought out, but talk to me a little bit more about that. What does the team bring and how does that help you?
Well, a couple of things happened. As Adam will laugh when I say this, and my team members, when they hear this podcast, will also laugh. I'm a little bit of a type A, anal one, everything perfect kind of a guy. And I'm looking at the camera, and Adam's grimacing and laughing at the same time
I
because we
said the
all know.
most beautiful hangar on the planet. Don't
Oh my God.
there's coasters everywhere. You
Right.
better not set your drink down without a coaster under it in Mike's hangar.
So I'm the kind of guy that, like, I loved my race plane. And to me, it was, I'm still a kid that was given the chance to do amazing things in amazing airplanes. And like, I wanted it clean. I wanted the bugs off of it and all of these kind of things. And I wanted it perfect all the time. And, before we got this team assembled, I was the one like cleaning the bugs, cleaning the canopy, because it was just my thing. Right. And then, but it was more a sense of, I knew my other team, they were not as dedicated to the process of perfection that I was. But then with this team, they were all so uh, dedicated, and they were all in on what we were trying to do. And we all knew our role, right? And my role was 1/5 of the team. There were 5 of us on that team, and we were each equally dedicated to the success. So the pie was cut in 5 ways. I did my job, they did their jobs. I never worried that they weren't going to do their jobs to 150% of their ability, which just gave me the ability to relax and focus on flying the airplane, right? I didn't have to think about the business side. So when I say it's a team sport, um, that's what I mean, right? They took their equal weight and put it on their shoulders. So all the pilot had to do was fly. And that was so great for me because it freed my mind up to be like, hey, I'm going there as 1/5 of this team. Yes, I might own the team. Everybody's quote working for me, but we're all working with each other. And that was so freeing to be able to have a team that is so committed alongside you, and it was just amazing, and we all had the goal. And when one of us made a mistake, we're like, oh, okay, it was usually me, like, and they would make a joke. They're like, huh, we gave you a great race plane, what happened, boss? I'm like, well, I guess I was having a rough day, as they might say, and we all kind of laughed it off, and it was okay, and we were all super committed. And I think that was the big thing, is the team was so important in allowing me to be great. And if I screwed up, like, they were cool with that. They're like, hey, that's okay. You weren't great today. You tried your best, and nobody's mad at each other, and we just went on to the next one.
Adam, you talked a lot about culture earlier on, and kind of, I guess it sounds like you created a really strong team culture there. What kind of aspects of that culture are important for you as a psychologist looking at this? And again, do you have an input in creating that culture, or cultivating that culture, or shaping it, or again, is it just kind of more of an organic thing?
Gosh, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that as someone that's been in this space for a while. So
Mm,
one, I think if someone's experienced, ethical, and know what they're doing, I hope whoever their employer is allows them to help impact that. Because if not, they're leaving knowledge off the table, right? They're leaving impact off the table. Because I think it's one of the challenges, I think, in how sports psychology, mental performance gets used, that we think, and Mike was great because he said, Adam, let's build this, let's do this. How do we do this, right? He valued me as a professional. That I often say, I believe that, yeah, I can sit with an athlete and teach them to be mentally tough. But if they're in an environment that's either toxic, confusing, it doesn't matter. Our
mm,
mental performance doesn't happen in a vacuum. I even think it's a bad move on a consumer state. If the consumer's like, okay, you go make Mikey mentally tough, I'll be like, sure, but what if we've got a hanger that's just emotionally out of whack? And I think when I look at it, and it's been I think a hallmark of my career for quite a while. I think I come in fairly unassuming, I hope, but with a nice amount of knowledge where people go, oh, do you mind impacting more? I rarely walk in and go, we're going to shake this whole thing up. To
mm.
me, that's like a bad executive consultant move. Like that's like something out of a movie in the 80s. we kind of sit there and you just kind of, if someone has invited you in, you move with it as a team. Um, and you said it, right? Because I think about it. So, Mike, I'm trying to remember order of events and how you added people to the team. I think Pablo might have been after me, but even once Pablo joined the team, he's like, "Hey, Adam, can I talk to you?" So Mike also built a team that was ready to be a team,
Mhm.
that was ready to kind of learn and grow together. I'll tell you, like the amount I learned from this team. As I said, I'm an aviation geek now, right? It's amazing that I can tell you, like, yeah, 10 G's is no big deal. We worried about Mikey when he was over 12, right? Like I can't believe that came out of my mouth, for God's sakes, right? So I think it was a team that wanted to learn together, but also wanted to support each other, as Mike said. And I think, again, I'll say it again, the line again. Anyone that thinks that the mental game exists in a vacuum is an absolute fool. You're not going to get to where you want to go. And it was a team that all played their roles, but also integrated nicely. I was raised by a woman from the North Shore of Boston, so that means you're always supposed to be helpful. I fought every single urge to take a screwdriver and try and help on the plane because that no good could have come of that. Even though I want to go, look, Warren's helping. Like maybe I should help Warren. I'm like my family will say that I'm not allowed to do home care stuff, let alone help out on a plane that's going to be in the air. So, Mike, you never knew I had to fight that urge periodically to be helpful on a plane, and thank God I was. But
I'm so
everyone
glad.
kind of played their role. Oh my God, I'm glad too because I don't have that much liability insurance in my life.
Restraint was good. Thank you.
But so I think Pete, just my philosophy is it can't exist in all my current roles. I care about the person in front of me, but I hope we're building a culture and an environment together so we can thrive because that's the game changer.
Yeah, I think that's such good advice that you've just given there. To any kind of up and coming psychs who are maybe listening to this, any sort of trainees about impacting on culture, because like you said, performance doesn't happen in a vacuum. Culture is important, and take those opportunities to have an impact on that, because we've seen that, as you've described, it's such an important aspect of performance.
Yeah, and I think you said something. If I think trainees, right? Because I think everyone wants to impact at this level. Like even as Mike was talking about how long it took him to be excellent.
Mm.
Gosh, I don't know how long was I in the field before I walked into Mike's hangar. 2015. We're talking probably 15 years, right? I wasn't in my first 5 years, and I didn't even do it with Mike. I think young folks are like, I heard I should impact the environment. Let me tell them I'm going to impact their environment.
Mm.
You notice as I said it, we kind of let it come together so it was an invitation for me to impact,
Mm-hmm.
not me putting someone in a headlock and going, your environment sucks, let me fix it. Because it
Sure.
didn't suck, frankly. I think that's a really arrogant place that sports psychers can come from sometimes, going, we can fix your environment. I'm like, come on. These are high performance environments. Our job is to nudge it.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
yeah, because the tendency is to want to make that impact straight away, isn't it? To kind of go in there all guns blazing,
And it's
but
the worst
it's
thing.
really just
We know it
hold
from
that. Yeah,
change management. If you go in trying to give advice and you weren't invited to, you're going to get resistance.
yeah.
So, in environment shaping to me, it's no fun if I don't get to do it, frankly, as a professional. But if I try and force it, it's going to meet resistance, and or maybe I wasn't invited to do that.
No, absolutely. Mike, tell me about, we're talking about culture and like how that impacts on performance. Tell me about how you go from being excellent to elite, like, top tier performances, like 2018, 5 podiums in 8 races, something like that. You talked a little bit about consistency earlier in terms of, setting those realistic expectations and goals and performances. But talk to me about that. How do you go from excellent to consistently elite?
I think ultimately it's combining all of these things that we've already spoken about, but to try to sort of whittle it down to one thing, I think it's self confidence, right? And uh, we've my family, my daughter and I have a 17-year-old daughter, and we've been Formula One fans for ages and ages and ages. And we went to Austin last year, and then we just came back from Europe where we went over and said hello to the Red Bull folks and went to the Red Bull Ring and watched the Formula One race there. And it's just hard not to be appreciative of how dominant Max Verstappen is at the moment. And it's interesting when you watch him, when you see the way he interacts with his team. He's taking risks with pit stops when his team doesn't want him to, because he has self belief both in himself and his team that he makes risky decisions. And when I look at that, I think, oh, that's a lot of the way that we felt in 2018, or I felt like, hey, there was not anything that we couldn't do. For instance, I over G'd in Budapest twice and finished last in qualifying. And I can remember we were flying against a pilot who was super fast, and in their media debrief after, in their talk with the press, that pilot said, "Yeah, Michael made a couple of mistakes today, but I'm going to have to be really fast to beat him tomorrow." And I was like, we've already won, right? And so it was funny. So I knew on Saturday night that all I had to do was, quote, go throw a number. We did. He made mistakes. We won. We kept going on. And then we got into the Final Four. Same thing in Indianapolis, which was a really amazing, epic win. I think we qualified 8th or 9th. We just weren't finding it, right? And I can remember the four of us got in the car to drive home, and there was like complete silence in the car. And I just screamed at the top of my lungs and pounded the seat. And then Warren did it. And then Pablo did it. And then Mankins were like, Emily, she was our team coordinator, like, you have to do the same. So we all swore and screamed and punched the car. And we said, okay, that's all good. Now let's go win a race tomorrow. And we did. And just because we knew we could, right? And so to me, self-confidence is that. And when I look at like where Lewis Hamilton is today, I know that Lewis Hamilton is amazing, but for some reason, he just doesn't have that super amazing swagger that he had 2 years ago, right? And is it his performance? Is it the car's performance? Is it the team? Because the guy's amazing, right? And so there's this fine line, and it seems to me that in any of these sports, there's one or two people that clearly are just clicking in a season, and then everybody else is trying to find it. And I think a lot of that is just that self-belief. And it's such a fine line. You almost don't know how you got there, and then you almost don't know how you've lost it, right? And I think in 2018, it was just complete self-belief in my skill and the team's ability to give me a good plane. And I think when you look at Verstappen in the race today, it's kind of the same way. It's pretty impressive to watch, but it won't be forever, right?
Yeah. Adam, listening to that, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have so many. One, I think there's a sneaky tidbit that just went in there when I think about how we worked and all grew together. He mentioned qualifying and practice. I can tell you early on, like qualifying and practice was like a judgment on oneself, going, "Oh God, was I fast today? Was I slow today? How did other people do in practice?" And I remember, like, I get it. Like I always joke, outcomes matter. The more my athletes win, the smarter I look. For God's sake, so trust me, I get it matters. But I remember sitting with my dad, I'm like, I felt like I pulled out my best Allen Iverson. I'm like, it's practice. Wasn't your job to learn about the plane? Wasn't your job to, but there was this whole, and this happens in all sports, going, how'd they do? Am I going fast? Whatnot. So literally, I think Mike's saying something interesting. He's training, he's reflecting, he's learning. The whole team got to the point where, guess what? One run doesn't define your next run. And now think about how powerful that is, right? It goes back to that golf mindset you mentioned. Okay, qualified last. I'm a fast pilot. See you tomorrow, right? So, and again, it doesn't mean there wasn't like, oh God, did we just do that? There's definitely a healthy kick your own butt. But there was not really, you know what mattered? Race day mattered. You know what mattered? The final race you get to race. And hopefully the final race you get to race is for the podium.
Yeah, and
And
a lot of things. Go
yeah,
ahead, I'm sorry.
no, I think that's great. And I did, but when you said, I was like, that to me was a powerful thing of dropping the practice mentality became a practice mentality, not a am I good enough mentality. It was like, we're here to practice.
Yeah, and as I think back about some of the things, like I just stopped looking at the timesheet. Like it didn't matter. I can remember we'd qualify and we'd do the whole thing, and then we'd meet with a bunch of people. We'd go do a press conference, and then we leave. And I was like, "Oh, hey, how did Yoshi qualify? Oh, how did Kirby qualify? Who do we fly against tomorrow?" Like we didn't even care. Like I didn't know. Like it doesn't matter, and we just said, "Well, we have to beat them all anyway, so what's the big deal?" And like I just stopped caring who flew where. Like it was interesting to me, and this is something that I didn't realize while I was doing it, but when you look back after, like I was racing against myself. I didn't care what anybody else did. It was interesting. I lived in my own world. It was like maybe it was just sort of super egotistical, but I'm like, I don't care. I'm just there to care how I do. I don't care how anybody else does, right? And I didn't even pay attention. I'm like, I don't care where you qualified. Doesn't bother me. Hey, you're a heck of a guy. Let's go have a beer tomorrow night after the race. But like, I don't care how you do. Same thing in the race. I was like, who do I fly against in the first round? Okay, who do I fly against in the second round? Okay, who do we have to beat in the final four to go? And then we just did it. And you didn't like the race unfolded around you and you didn't care, right? After you looked up on the screen at the end, you're like, oh, that's how it ended. Okay, great. But I was so ingrained in my own world, I didn't care about anybody else's world.
And to go to the team piece, Mike, when you say that, I think about it, all the years, but that year too, the team was at its worst when the team was taking the bait on that. If one team member said, "Oh, so and so went fast today," it was like, "No, no, 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 no. We race against them. We don't care how they did." Right, right. Like I think there was that going back to this team culture of how do we infect. Like Mike had gained that mentality, but there wasn't also a whole different dialogue going on. There wasn't,
Right.
because I think we had moments that year where every now and then we talk as a team, or I'd talk to a few team members. They'd be like, "Yeah, in this round, I started getting a little panicky about Hanger X." It was like, we got out of our bubble. And I know you used to say that year was you get in your bubble and you be in your bubble. So I don't think it was egotistical at all. I think it was the attack. It's like we lay down 99 times. We're the 99 plane. This is how we race. Let's see what happens. It was a very confident and trusting mindset actually. And as Mike said,
Yeah.
it was like, and sometimes we might lose, but guess what? We're a pretty fast plane.
And I ended up like the entire year, I would literally put earplugs in my ears on qualifying morning in my hotel room and went to breakfast, went to the airport, went to the whole thing. I'd only take my earplugs out just to listen to the main aviation briefing, put my earplugs because I didn't want to hear what other conversations were going on. And I just drowned out the rest of the world. And I was just living inside of myself through the whole time. Right. And that was just the way that I did it, is like I just drowned out the noise. So even at breakfast, like everybody's chatting around me and I'm just like, oh, these eggs are pretty good. And that was kind of the thing. And I didn't get sucked into what was happening in the hangar
I
or
mean,
the
that's really
on.
interesting because I was gonna ask you kind of what how you get into that mindset, but you literally drowned out the noise.
I
Some
did.
athletes kind of figuratively find ways of distracting themselves or whatever, but you like literally plugged your ears so you couldn't hear what was going on
Yeah,
around you.
absolutely. Don't want to know. It all became a mumble.
Well, you also the little, and you shared this. I know a podcast a year ago. You ended up with two phones and shutting down the phone where people would blow you up during it.
A retired racer friend of mine, Nigel Lamb from the UK, amazing guy. He's like, Michael, I think you're too busy to win a world championship. You can't win a world championship. And like, what do you mean? And he's like, hey, you should be proud of this great business that you're doing and all these air shows you're flying. And he's like, but your life is too busy, too cluttered. I don't know if you can do it. And that's all he had to say to me. So what we did is basically I bought another phone that only had my wife, my daughter, and my mother's phone numbers in it. That was it. And that's how people communicated with me. I gave away my iPad, my computer, everything. And so when I stepped on the airplane in Boston to go to Budapest, Abu Dhabi, Tokyo, wherever it might be, I was again sort of mentally out of that world and into the race world. And so I didn't read social media in any way because everybody was talking about the race and who was fast and who wasn't. And again, for me, I just personally work better when I'm not engaged in the noise. I didn't
Mm.
want it's like it's meaningless anyways. It's a bunch of people talking and blah blah blah. So I was like, it doesn't matter. And I knew what they were going to say, like, oh my God, can anybody meet Michael Goulian this weekend? Or they're like, Michael Goulian threw it away in the last race, and is he going to crumble under the pressure again? And like, I don't want to hear any of that. Like, I don't care. It's all just it's selling tickets anyway, right? Like,
Yeah.
who cares? So I just shut myself off from all of that, which I thought was a big benefit, actually.
There's another
And you,
cool note in there. Sorry, Pete. Like Nigel told you you're too busy to win. Some people hear that and go, Mike did not sell his other businesses or stop flying air shows. He set up a way where he could be a professional when it was time to be a Red Bull professional. And I think that's a critical note, right? So often we hear elite athletes talk, well, I only did this. Mike's a really diverse aviator, but he set the stage so he could be present with his Red Bull when it was time to be present with the Red Bull. And I think that's one of Mike. I hope you don't mind me saying. Like, I think that's one of the really interesting things about those final seasons is highly successful on at least three fronts, right? Because air shows, like you're a top billing. Red Bull, we're getting podiums, and you have your hangar and your flight school. So that's not normal if you can't focus on each one of those. And
Yeah.
Mike learned how to focus on each one of those and not let all of them collapse on him. So just a pro note there, Mike. I want to make sure that the audience heard there's a subtlety there. It wasn't sell your businesses so you can win Red Bull.
mm.
Right.
Yeah, it's the ultimate in compartmentalizing, but doing that in a way where you can still give attention to the things that need attention. And that creating that bubble thing is really interesting to me because when you were talking there, you mentioned social media, and I was going to say, how many athletes are willing to do that, to create a bubble to that extent? We hear a lot about athletes. Steph Curry goes on Twitter at halftime and checks out what people are saying, and and it works for him because he goes out and scores. Drops 45 in the second half. But for other athletes, it is a huge distraction. So what you're talking about there is like going to really extreme lengths, getting rid of your iPad, having a phone with only a couple of contact numbers in it when it matters, to create that bubble to make sure that your mind is in the right place for performance.
Yeah, I think it just goes to show that one size doesn't fit all, and we're all motivated to be great in different ways. And obviously, Steph does it in a different way. And I think Michael Jordan did the same thing, right? Just insult Michael Jordan in the press before a playoff game, and you were in trouble. But I don't work that way,
Yeah.
unfortunately, or fortunately. It's just I guess I was fortunate to find out what does work for me, and we implemented that.
So this is the 80% Mental Podcast, and I'm here with Red Bull Air Race pilot Mike Goulian and mental performance consultant Dr. Adam Naylor. We've been having a really fantastic conversation about the psychology of the skies and the application of mental skills, mental performance skills to a really interesting performance context. I've just got a couple of other questions, really, before we finish. If that's okay with both of you guys. I want to come to Adam first. We've talked about quite a lot of different ways in which the psychologist can have an impact. We've talked about team culture. We've talked about specific mental skills, and your approach is very much an organic approach. You're using the athlete and helping them kind of build their own set of skills to what might be useful for them. As a psychologist working in this performance environment, working with Mike, what have you learned? What have you learned maybe about yourself, and what have you learned as a psychologist?
God, that's a pretty wild question in a lot of ways, right? And I think everyone's heard me say it. I think I've learned or was reminded about myself how I am a constant learner, and that's really important to me in everything I do, right? Because I don't say it jokingly that being part of this team turned me into an aviation geek, right? Mike might get a laugh about this. I'm like, okay, he's going to ask me for what did I learn? So I learned this, Mike. Wingtips matter, but the pilot matters more. So stop complaining about what the wingtips look like. Right? Is that fair? We had a few of those, okay?
Yep.
This is a depressing one, I think, to many of us sports psych people, but it is a reality that I think we have to realize, but never use as an excuse. A great mental game without the plane doesn't win, right? And that's, but that, it seems obvious to all of us. But Mike, right, was year one, year two, like you had a nice plane and we had a pilot that was really good, but without, we referred to it as white lightning, that every now and then he scarred up a little red when he hit a few pylons. But once that plane was there, it was cooking. But I'll add to this too. The plane didn't get the wins either, because we also know this from others racing in Red Bull. The plane without a mental game is not podium material. Mike, right? We can probably go through your comparison and go, so and so had a fabulous plane. There you go, another 10. So I think we need to know that, and again, that's why the whole culture matters, right? If you don't align the culture at this level, you
Yeah.
can't quite get there.
Well, and so I think that was one of the things that was interesting in the air race for the people that were trying to chase it, is the belief that spending $40 bazillion on my airplane on modifications and lightning and this and that are going to make me win. It's not. Like, and I was one of those, right? We chased it and chased it and chased it. And I think we were in the belief that we didn't have the fastest airplane, but we probably had like a top 3 or 4 airplane. So all you had to do is get it in the ballpark, because the pilots can add or subtract 2 seconds a lap. And like, to get a race plane that's 2 seconds faster would, like, it's almost impossible to do. So in the top end there of the front end of the grid, it was really the teams. If you looked overall, it was the teams that in general had high functioning teams, and they had the equipment to go along with it. But our team was by no means the most sophisticated in analyzing, or like, I know there are teams that had amazing simulators and that we didn't have any of that. But what I did know is I had Warren that could maintain the plane, and Pablo, who was a racer in general, thinking about how do we go faster all the time. But like, reality is I had nothing to do with the say of the modifications that went into my plane. They did it. I'm like, just give me a plane and I'll go fly it. Yes, I'm going to pay for it. Okay. Right. Like, I'm the team boss. So like, yeah, like I'm always going to pay for your smart ideas. Some of them work, some of them didn't. But I was like, just give us a plane that's close enough, and then we'll make the difference. And we did that.
I got my third one though. That's not just aviation related. So I figure I got to give this before.
Go for it.
As a sports psycher, the domain matters. And to me, this was a really, I can't tell you, and Mike and I never talked about it, it's just how I operate. Like, I did so much learning and research that first year because, right, all the basics of sports psych, it was like, oh, be mindful while you're flying. There's no such thing as mindful flying when you're under 12 G's of pressure, right? Because Mike can't take a nice deep breath while trying not to pass out in the air.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden going, hey, like, no. What is the domain we're dealing with? And what is the right mental game to go with it? Right? So when Mike talks about being an athlete and feel and seeing, I had to go, wait a second. I can't take the basic mental game textbook that they use for golf and go, well, that'll work great for Red Bull. Because last time I checked, there's no golfers under even 2 G's of pressure. Well, yeah, there's nerves, but there's not these physiological components that really shape it. There's not the, all of the natural components of wind and whatnot. So taking enough time to not be an expert on it, but to go, wait a second, what actually doesn't transfer to this sport? How do we transfer these ideas so they work? That's why I never fixed your mental game on golf, Mike, because this stuff is a little bit different. Sorry. And you're a hell of a golfer, so I'm not sure I can fix it.
I'm not so sure about that.
Mike, last question, and let's wrap this up. Last question to you. What would you say that you have really learned about yourself from your career in the skies?
Wow. Okay, Pete, you're getting really deep here. I would have to say that I was given good hand-eye coordination as a kid, right? I was given the right environment to grow up with, and it's taken a lifetime of trial and error to get where you get to. And that whole idea of hard work and preparation meets opportunity creates luck. Kind of, I was in that thing, and you have to be surrounded by the right people. And Adam was one of those people, right? And I didn't know how good I was or how good I could be, and I became more proud of how we did as a team as opposed to how well I did as an individual flyer on a day, right? We had a group of people moving in a direction, and it's really cool. I said the greatest athletes make everybody else around them great, whether that's Jordan or Brady or whoever it might be. And I felt like that year, and it might not have been the next year or the year before it, but on that year, I was able to be like, hey, I'll try to lead and let's everybody come with me and let's create something great. Because my whole team was a bunch of superstars that year. And we did that all together.
No, that's a wonderful answer. And I think it really sums up one of the themes that's run through this episode, and that's that performance doesn't happen in a vacuum. The culture is important, team is important. And I love that answer there, Mike. I want to thank you both so much for your time this evening. It's been a genuinely fascinating insight into a world that I genuinely didn't know very much about coming into the episode. I hope our listeners have found it as interesting as I have. So to Mike Goulian, thank you so much for coming on 80% Mental.
Pleasure. Thank you. It's been an honor.
And Dr. Adam Naylor, same to you. Thank you so much for giving up your time.
Thanks so much, Pete. Thanks, Mike. It's always fun to talk to both of you.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please do share it on your own social media. Spread the good word about 80% Mental. And you can subscribe at 80percentmental.com or indeed wherever you get your podcasts. You can leave a comment on the website, or you can get a hold of us on Twitter or X if you're that way inclined these days, at EPM Podcast, or on Instagram at 80% Mental. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Although I won't see you there, will I? Because it's a podcast. Cool.